when you play with AI content enough, you can see its fingerprints all over a piece of writing. The PR industry is especially guilty of that. Every article that starts with a line that says something like, in a world where, or at a time when, someone has got ChatGPT to do their writing for them. I don't have anything against journalists using AI, but don't make it so obvious. Don't make it so average.
And with us today, we have Arthur Goldstuck, who is an award-winning writer, author, analyst, and technology commentator. He's the founder of Worldwide Works, South Africa's leading technology market research organization. He is, the cloud in Africa. He's won business-to-business marketing categories and a slew of awards. He's received the Lifetime Achievement Awards in multiple sectors, including the Distinguished Service in RCT Award and the Institute of IT Professionals of South Africa in 2013. He's also written some incredible books and is just recently launching his new AR book, which sounds very, very interesting. We're going to get into it in a moment. And we have also with us Masa. I don't see Masa, but Masa, if you can refresh and just reshare your camera while I introduce you. Masa Kekana is a South African journalist and highly acclaimed anchor and reporter to the national award-winning investigative journalism show Carte Blanche on Mnet. We all know Carte Blanche very well if you're from South Africa. She's also a news anchor, 24-hour news channel, Newsroom Africa, hosting a primetime show when not on Carte Blanche. She worked at one of the country's leading agencies, Eyewitness News, which services 4 major radio stations, Talk Radio 702, Cape Talk, KFM, and 94.7. And she's actually joining us while she's on a shoot today for Carte Blanche. So thank you in a rural area. So if we have lost her, because I don't see her, I don't know if anyone else can see her. Awesome, Masa. Yeah, you can just jump up there. And thank you so much for making yourself available. I know you are on a shoot at the moment in the middle of somewhere far away.
I am coming in from Knysna. I'm busy with an investor. There I am, and that's why I am in a vehicle, because I am slightly also undercover, which is the job of being a journalist, especially for a publication like Carte Blanche.
Fantastic. Well, we won't ask you what you're doing there, but I'm sure it's.
You'll see it on screen soon. When you see this top, everyone know it was this.
Fantastic. So I think, guys, let's jump straight into the conversation. I know we do have a short time together today, and we really want to dive into this conversation and then open it up to anyone for questions, or you can either ask them in the chat, or you can go into one of those blue circles in the room, and it will project your voice to the entire room. So let's start off with you, Arthur, since you have just launched, or you are launching a new AR book. How do you see AR reshaping the newsroom from content creation to editorial decision making?
Initially, AI has had quite a negative impact on the newsroom, but in the long term, I think it'll be very positive. Right now, people are using AI as a shortcut to do their work for them, and it shows. A lot of journalists think that AI is invisibly writing their content for them, but when you play with AI content enough, you can see its fingerprints all over a piece of writing. The PR industry is especially guilty of that. So every article that starts with a line that says something like, in a world where, or at a time when, someone has got ChatGPT to do their writing for them, because they're cliches and structures that are dead giveaways of AI. I don't have anything against journalists using AI, but don't make it so obvious. Don't make it so average. So the problem with large language models is that they are not fact predictors, they're word predictors. They predict what word should follow the one that went before. And the result of that is that it looks for the most likely word, which one can translate as the most average word or set of words. So what I'm really saying there is that AI produces very average content filled with cliches. And that's the problem with AI or articles having all these AI fingerprints all over them. It starts becoming very typical and therefore very average and therefore very mediocre. So in the short term, we are seeing AI promoting mediocrity in the newsroom or in writing. But in the longer term, as journalists get to grip with it and use AI to do the heavy lifting, as they say, then they can focus more on being creative and bringing themselves and their own voice into the writing, while AI does the background research. For example, one of the great boons of AI is that you can record an interview, for example, an hour-long interview, have it transcribed by AI, and then upload that transcript into any AI tool, Gemini, Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude. There are quite a few that are really good at that. And ask it to bring to the surface the best comments or the best quotes related to a specific theme that you want to write about. And that sequence of events cuts down what used to be half a day's work to a few minutes. And then you start working on those quotes, for example, to create a piece in your own voice where you can really focus on producing quality journalism. And that's what I believe is the opportunity. So not necessarily what's going to happen, but it's the opportunity that presents itself to the media.
I love that. So it's about using AI to actually, do more quality work, help you with the fact checking, speed up your processes, but not to be lazy and to just, try to automate some of that work. And especially if you're not fact checking, the AIs can hallucinate a lot. So, we could see a lot of fake news actually coming out that's pretty convincing.
No, for sure. For sure.
And Masa, what are your thoughts on this? Are you using it to maintain journalistic integrity, or how are you using AI in your journalism?
So I find AI to be an incredible tool if you know how to use it and when to use it. Not everything requires that in journalism. Some things need your human interaction, your human intervention in it. And coupled with the necessary and skills, the ability to be able to use AI, that can come very beneficially so. Where I find it beneficial currently for me is in transcribing. We do long format interviews. I sometimes sit with someone for over an hour speaking to them, and where AI comes in very handy is those transcriptions as well. However, I still need to go back and check on it and what it actually says, because simple words can be misconstrued. I mean, South Africans have 11 official languages, but then we also speak South African. So we've got our own words that aren't necessarily in a dictionary that can be misconstrued in an AI transcription that need to be verified and checked. I find it very interesting in a newsroom, because you can also pick it up very quickly when someone hasn't written that. We all have our own style of writing. AI, for me, I find to be a good skeleton. It provides you with a skeleton, so it's not a daunting task, because journalism is a lot of laborious work, a lot of research involved, which is necessary to get things right. However, where AI helps is that it kind of gives you the direction that you can go into. So it will provide a bulk of that research, and then you go through that research and read it. And something interesting that you mentioned, where the dangers come in when it comes to fake news. And I have been a victim of this as a broadcaster, where I didn't actually say the words that are coming out of my mouth on a video that is on social media, but it's the background of me launch, and it says something that I actually didn't say. And obviously AI was used to make it seem legitimate, and that's where we get these fake news. And initially it was easier to spot fake news. I can spot that because I know I didn't say that. But for anyone else watching it, seeing a backdrop of Carte Blanche or Newsroom Africa behind me and my lips moving and saying that, that is the real danger, and that's where it lies. For me, it's about knowing when and how to use it, and realizing it's your assistant, it's not your brain.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think blockchain technology is going to really help with mitigating what's real and what's fake, because if you know that it's from a reliable source on a smart contract, and from Carte Blanche's smart contract as an example, it came from that source. and then that content can be shared through the blockchain. And what are you seeing in terms of the rise of the creator-led platforms and citizen journalism? What role do you think as traditional media? What is the role of traditional media today?
Citizen journalism almost became a bit of it's got pros and cons, right? And the cons obviously being that they aren't actual real journalists. So, things can be fake, things can be misconstrued. But even though it is quite necessary, because the news cycle, however, doesn't include everyone's story. So it's nice to be able to just have your cell phone and take a couple of videos and report on what you're seeing in your area if there are no reporters coming through. With that being said, while there was seemingly a threat of journalism in the beginning, one can see, and even viewers themselves, who also are citizen journalists, the need for mainstream traditional media, because we do that fact checking. We do that fact checking, and it's not about an agenda. With citizen journalism, if I'm standing here in the informal settlement that I find myself in with lots of things that are going wrong, I can take out my video and report on this live from here. But I do then miss some of the other variables as well that we would typically use. The fact-checking variables as well, some of the editorial variables. So as a citizen journalist, you don't have a sub-editor, you don't have an editor, you don't have a head of news, you don't have a legal department. All these channels that as a journalist have to go through before I then go and publish that story or whatever it may be.
I think that's a really, really interesting point. Exactly, you need the team, and you need the whole network to really make sure that it's quality journalism. And Arthur, do you think we're moving towards like a bit of a hybrid model where newsrooms collaborate with independent creators? Are you seeing any of that?
We are seeing a lot of that, but it's more a case of publishers looking for a cheap way out by bringing in free or cheap contributors. But I think there will be a backlash to that, and there will be almost a boomerang effect where they come back to the values of news creation, as Masa was just saying, that there's a whole supply chain that goes into news creation and story creation in the media, which doesn't apply when it comes to citizen journalists or social media journalists, if you like. One of my worst pieces of terminology is the word microblogging, which is the let's say the pompous way of describing people's posts on X or Twitter or on Threads or wherever. It's not microblogging. They're not blogging in any way. They're just posting their thoughts. And that becomes conflated with citizen journalism. And I think, generally speaking, citizen journalism and posting on social media are almost one and the same thing in most cases, where it's referred to as citizen journalism. There are certain publications that have specific platforms for citizen journalism where they do engage in a level of fact-checking. But the moment it doesn't form part of that supply chain of news from source to publication, and it's simply someone posting their own thoughts, it might as well be in a comment section or on social media.
Yeah, super interesting. I think we lost Masa there. Maybe she'll come back. I think she's in Nasna. It's a bit of bad internet, but we are getting some questions in the chat here. Maybe we can answer one from KK Diaz from gamebusiness.com. Great question. Won't AR avatars like we have in this room, or better, take over the role of new TV, radio presenting? It's taking over standard presentations, teaching, etc. What are your thoughts on that?
What we've seen so far is that it's used as a gimmick. It's a novelty for people, but it's very hard for people to relate to that avatar. The very fact that you have us on camera here, as well as our avatars, is almost an indication that you don't believe that people would engage as much with our avatars as they would with us showing our faces. And I think the same applies to avatars as presenters or as news reporters. People don't really trust them, they don't relate to them. They want to relate to a human being. And the same applies to the AI-generated TV presenters that we've seen over the years. They've all been really novelties and gimmicks to show what the news medium is capable of, rather than actually providing a service. It doesn't actually service the viewer or listener any better than the human being does. And in many cases, it does it more poorly. And because we have this phenomenon of hallucination in AI, people don't trust an AI-generated presenter. It might be fact-checked, it might be accurate, but people still don't believe it because they've seen how bad AI gets at presenting the facts or getting the facts straight. But ultimately, it comes to the engagement that the viewer has with the news medium. And if the viewer feels that they're not engaging, or they can't make a connection, or they can't relate to the presenter as someone who almost is part of their lives, then it's not going to go anywhere. I'm not saying it's never going to happen. I do believe that we'll find AI that is so cute, clever, and cutting edge in ways that are not technology related, but rather human interface and human interaction related, that people will start engaging with them. I think we will, for example, if I can just draw an analogy quickly with the world of the performing arts. We've seen on Spotify, for example, we had the band that developed a strong following and turned out to be completely AI generated. I don't see anything wrong with that, quite frankly, except that people should be aware of the fact that it's an AI generated performance. But if they enjoy it, if they relate to it, then that's fine by me. But I think people want to relate to human beings in performance, and I think the same applies to presenting the news live. Not necessarily what you read in the paper, but what you get presented to you on screen.
Yeah, so I mean, funny enough, I've actually cloned myself, and I've been delivering a clone of myself about a year and a half, and a lot of people have said to me, "You look a bit stilted," and in that, but it's it's getting better and better, and I agree with you. In a few months or years, it will be at a point where it's really, really high quality. We've got another question here from Jeroboam, who is asking, how do journalists and journalism and the journalism community stay relevant in the adoption of AI?
Well, I'd like to point to some of the publications that have emerged in the last few years, some in the past decade and some just in the last few months. And I look at publications like Daily Maverick and The Currency, for example, which have a definite voice. And The Currency is a good example of a financial newspaper that's got a very strong voice. A lot of people won't appreciate all the voices that come through on it, but it's a classic example of something that is the product of the people who are creating it. And you would be very hard pressed to get AI to generate that kind of diversity of voices, but also the quality of expression of those voices. And I think it's a great object lesson to the media in how they can remain relevant in the age of AI, because that was launched at the epicenter of the generative AI revolution.
Yeah. So and then Ryan Noack is asking here, do you think that the abundance of the very biased and skewed news organizations, for example, in the US, which are very aligned to one political party or the other or another, will increase the value of good, impartial, unbiased journalism? And do you think the rise of fake news and propagandist news will actually make people realize the value of good journalism? I mean, we've seen so much fake news come out in the last year from multiple sides. So I think this is a fantastic question. Thank you, Ryan.
It is a great question, Ryan. I think that we've seen the way the echo chamber functions, especially in the United States, but we're not immune to it, where people only want to listen to views that echo their existing views, which makes it that much more difficult to persuade them to look objectively at information. So someone who believes Fox News is a be-all and end-all is not going to want to read the New York Times or watch CNN. unless something dramatic happens at Fox News that persuades them that this is not the gospel, for example. Same with people who believe every word that Trump broadcasts on Truth Social, for example. They would for a while have gone to Twitter or X to get alternative views, but with the war between Musk and Trump, they've probably abandoned X. So now they're only exposed to that small echo chamber of toxic information or toxic viewpoints, rather. How do you bring them back? That's the big challenge. And I don't have an answer to that, but certainly quality journalism, impartial journalism is one way. If you keep breaking the stories that matter and that make a difference, it has to break through at some point. But the question is, how long can you fund that kind of journalism? Who will fund that kind of journalism where everyone just wants the traffic that the echo chambers generate? Even on Meta, where they supposedly have community standards, which they abandoned very quickly when they wanted to curry favor with the US administration, we've seen how traffic trumps quality. Sorry, no pun intended there, but traffic is far more important to them than community standards. So the biggest media platforms in the world, which is the social media platforms like Facebook and TikTok, are not going to save us from this level of biased news. But something I guess I have to stress is that there's no such thing as truly unbiased coverage. Every journalist has a bias. So it's a question of just to what extent that bias influences their factual reporting. And to the extent that factual reporting does not get eroded by the bias, then you have a chance of countering the level of fake news, and more than fake news, toxic information that tends to be the norm.
Yeah, I mean, just moving it over to looking at these different exponential technologies and these immersive technologies like spatial computing or the metaverse. How do you think that's going to change the way stories are told and experienced? Like, are we going to see, if you put on a headset and you go into the 360 reporting, or having interactive storytelling formats? What are you seeing there? Where do you think that's going to go? And this is so fun for me, by the way, to be interviewing the journalists. Well,
I'm sorry if I'm hogging the answers because Masa isn't here, but I'm
She's having
sure
an issue with connectivity. She just messaged us. So we're trying to get her back.
But having chatted with her in the past, also I know she shares these views. So what I would say is that the metaverse is one platform or one medium in which news can be shared, but it won't dominate, it won't take over in the same way that social media looked like it was going to be the dominant form of news access until things went a bit pear-shaped at X, and Threads didn't live up to its promise, and Blue Sky is not attracting the kind of audience that we thought in the beginning it would. So no single social platform is going to be the arbiter of news either. What that tells us really is that the news medium of the future has to be one that can operate across all media, that is not confined to either print or social or the metaverse, but can use all of those where it's relevant, and to use them to their best advantage where that platform lends itself to the kind of coverage that is being presented.
Yeah, like I think immersive media, could drive deeper engagement and empathy, and we can see the rise of metaverse correspondence and virtual newsrooms, that will be coming in the future as sort of new mediums to the field. And we've got another question here from Scott Smith. Keep in mind there are tiers of journalism. Alerts, notifications, finance, or sports reports are primed to lead from AI personalized product development and delivery of journalism, which will also be more effective. But original reporting, interviews, news personalities won't be replaced. AI won't kill journalism as a role in democracy or just good factual, informative content. News organizations need to invest where relevant and pay attention to their audience. They'll be okay if they think smart. I totally agree with that. I don't know, Arthur, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I fully agree with Scott on almost all of that. An interesting area where AI is actually doing a great job is in finance journalism, where it comes to the straight reporting of the numbers and company results and the like. But the moment you need deeper insight that comes from experience, you need the human being. That original reporting and insight is not something that AI can replicate quickly. It can mimic it, but when you put AI doing that against a seasoned financial journalist, for example, the human journalist is going to run rings around the AI, not in terms of dredging up the facts, but in terms of understanding the dynamics at work.
Yeah, and I think if you think about like real-time feedback, shaping editorial strategies and audience engagement, it can really help with predictive analytics and A/B testing, seeing which content performs better. But what are the risks of over-optimization, in your opinion? Chasing clicks instead of serving the public good.
You essentially create a disconnect with the audience that you would most like to attract by going for traffic at all costs or at the expense of quality. You ultimately erode your credibility. There are quite a few publications in South Africa where traffic is the be-all and end-all. And when the marketing of themselves to advertisers is all about traffic and not about their quality journalism, you can usually tell that these are people who are optimizing for clicks and not for quality.
And then, we've got quite a lot of journalists in the room here today. And what skills will the next generation of journalists and content creators need to thrive in this exponential area, in your opinion?
It's an old story that goes back to before AI, when I think 10 years ago, Oxford University started looking at the skills that would be needed for the future and the jobs of the future that would not survive and would be replaced by automation. And one of the critical skills that was highlighted back then already and is more important than ever today is critical thinking. So that applies to the Gen AI world as well. When people say, how do you test or how do you assess people for university or school essays in this age of AI? I say, well, get them to get AI to produce the essay for them, but then to engage critically with that essay and criticize the essay or look at the positives and negatives. Where does it get it wrong? Where does it do it especially well? And what would you have done that would be different from what the AI did? That gets you engaging critically with the content. And I think that's a skill that schools have to teach from an early stage, is critical thinking. Part of the reason why these echo chambers have gone mad, especially in the United States, is that critical thinking is not part of the school syllabus. It's not part of the agenda. So it's not something that the current administration is going to encourage, because they particularly enjoy the fact that there's no critical thinking about what they tell the public. But I do believe that the school systems of the future must prioritize critical thinking over specific subject matter knowledge. Memorizing the dates of wars and countries' independence gives you no benefit whatsoever in future life. Teaching critical thinking is going to equip you for future life. That's the first one. The second one is problem solving, and it's very abstract as a concept, but it can be taught, and the principles of problem solving can be taught. The scientific method can be taught, although again, that's something that is not being encouraged by governments the world over at the moment, with science coming under attack, for example. But the scientific method is a very powerful tool that can be taught to people across all areas of activity. So those are the two areas, I believe, along with creativity, but not everyone is capable of being creative, let's face it. But if you could teach problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity, then the people equipped with those skills will be able to take on any of the emerging technologies as they come along.
Yeah, so I think I totally agree with all of that, and you need to have some form of tech fluency. You need to really be taught ethical storytelling. I think that's hugely important as a journalist. Like, how do you try find the truth and tell that truth in the best way, and be adaptable to these changes that are coming so fast. You need to be there's new platforms, there's new technologies, there's new ways of using the tools. Like Masa was on her phone in the middle of Knysna connecting to the metaverse, but with the connectivity issue, it still has been a challenge. So thank you for being adaptable to taking this conversation with just me and yourself. And do you think journalism journalism schools should be teaching AI prompt design and data visualization, or these new immersive storytelling techniques?
There's no question whatsoever. Good prompting can go hand in hand with quality journalism. But again, doing the heavy lifting for you and ensuring that you're not promoting hallucination, or that you're not participating in fake news, for example. But there's a very simple solution to that. You produce the content in one AI and you ask another AI to fact check it for you. I find Copilot, for example, is great at fact checking the output of other AIs, but not so great at producing its own. So you've got to use a few in tandem with each other. But then the kind of prompts that you use enable you also to create excellent frameworks for your writing, and for you to then spend more time on how you want to express yourself rather than what information you want to put into the story.
And how, just one final point on this, is like, how do you think journalists can stay ahead of the curve without losing the human element?
They should buy a new book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to AI, The African Edge, that will be on the shelves from this weekend onwards.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to buy it in Cape Town on Friday at the Exclusive Books where it's launching. And I think in Joburg next week, right?
Yeah, it's going to, there isn't a formal launch because technically it's a second edition, but it is a new book. The theme is the African Edge because it looks at how AI is being used across Africa successfully in startling ways. And it's being printed in Cape Town as we speak, and it should reach Cape Town bookstores on Friday and Joburg on Monday.
Brilliant. And we've got a question here. Will there be a Kindle version?
Almost certainly. There is a Kindle version of the first edition, which is called The Hitchhiker's Guide to AI, a handbook for all. And there's also a print-on-demand edition for those in other countries. Amazon prints it on demand at a slightly higher cost.
Awesome. We'll make sure everyone here to go get it. If you're a journalist, or if you're just somebody that's interested in AI and having the African edge, I think it's so important for us to really develop and invest into AI in South Africa and Africa, because Imad Mustak, who's a good friend, one of the founders of Stability.ai, he says, not your models, not your mind. And if we aren't creating our own AI models in South Africa and Africa, we really are going to be bound to the biases of the other LLMs. So I think we've got time for one more question. If anyone wants to ask it, you can walk into the circle. You can unmute yourself. Oh, wait, we got one question from Douglas Watcher. Young people prefer to get the news from influencers. This is actually a really great point, and something we were discussing about this morning, about bringing the future of the creator economy and social media from a few influencers that are leading the way at the summit this year. And young people prefer to get their news from influencers. Does that mean organizations who are upfront about their biases are going to be more successful than those who claim not to be? I think this is one of the big topics at Cannes this year, is that a lot of these millennials have grown up trusting listening to influencers as their new source of media. It's a great question, Douglas Watt.
Well, I can't disagree that they prefer that, but what I would also say, however, is that they're confusing news with opinion. Because the influencer isn't really, the typical influencer isn't sharing news, they're simply giving their opinion, especially about products. The typical influencer makes their living through endorsing products. You can hardly call that news. So it's unlikely that we'll see your typical influencer, the celeb style influencer, being a trusted source of news in the longer term. In the short term, yes, you will find that someone will be the flavor of the moment to get information on a particular topic, for example, but certainly not in the long term, as their bias becomes quite clear and their affiliation to their paymasters become clear in particular. So what you will probably have is people who are professional news people, journalists, broadcasters, whatever the case might be, who themselves become influencers because they are so prominent. You know, you think of some of the legendary CNN journalists, for example, who you could describe as influencers, but they were journalists first. They were media people before they were influencers. But that category of influencers certainly will remain or will have a very prominent role in this environment, but not your celeb style influencer or your product endorsement style influencer, the one who shows off their fashion and how much money they spend on new cars and on travel, for example. No, that's not a source of news. That's just a source of lifestyle opinion.
It's so funny though, because people are, they really believe these influencers, what they say, and like you say, they are literally just earning their living, talking about that information. So
yeah. Actually, KK Diaz makes a very good point that news presenters and journalists should learn to become influencers. But it depends how you define influencer. But yes, anyone who wants to be a purveyor of news and opinion is going to have to learn the secrets or the tricks of being an influencer. They don't have to be the influencer of the typical profile that you get online, generally speaking, but they certainly can borrow the tricks and mimic the engagement tools of those influencers.
Yeah, I remember growing up and actually watching Carte Blanche, and whatever Derek or Ruda would say was like that was the truth. They were the original influencers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think you need to be more open to questioning everything, looking at the sources, realizing that it can be an hallucination or it can be AI generated. Yeah. But thank you so much.
100%. Thanks, Mick. Thanks, audience.
Thanks so much to the audience, and hope you enjoyed that. Make sure to like and subscribe to Exponential Africa on YouTube and our podcast. And we'll see you on the next Metaverse meetup that's going to be hosted by the very own Mic Mann, with some interesting speakers coming to those ones during the month of August. Thanks so much, and have a great afternoon or evening wherever you are. And we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers, everybody.